So as Colleen has suggested, please introduce yourself in the chat. There's going to be a lot of people here today, so we won't be able to do verbal introductions today. And for folks that don't know me, I'm Jim Hanna. I'm the Executive Director of the Cumberland County Food Security Council.
I'm having a hard time hearing you. See if I can get some.
Thank you for that. I will speak up or move close to my computer. Is that a little
Thanks.
better?
Yeah, I turned my volume on too. Thank you.
So to begin today, I'm going to invite Adele Wise, our local foods coordinator, to read a land acknowledgement to open the meeting. So Adele, if you're ready to do that, please do so.
Great, thanks. Hi, everyone. So my name is Adele Wise, and I'm the local foods coordinator, and I'll be sharing with you a land acknowledgement. So the Cumberland County Food Security Council is located on unceded Wabanaki Confederacy land, which is now known as Cumberland County, Maine. The Wabanaki nations, Abenaki, Maliseet, Micmac, Passamaquoddy, and Penobscot have stewarded the lands and waters in what is now known as Maine since long before colonists arrived. For many different reasons, we, members of CCFSC, were drawn to or raised on this land and have chosen this place to work and build our lives. We acknowledge that our presence here as settlers is perpetuating colonization, and our ability to be on this land is a result of theft, genocide, and unfathomable harm. As guests on these sacred lands and waters, we are committed to advocating for recognition of the Wabanaki nation's inherent sovereignty and the reparations they are owed. We stand in solidarity with our indigenous neighbors who continue to carry their culture and traditions forward despite the harm of our ancestors and historical and ongoing patterns of white supremacy. We advocate and work to ensure that these lands are treated with honor and respect. We humbly follow the leadership of the indigenous communities here to learn best how to steward these lands. We understand that food security is not possible without justice and liberation with and for the people of the Dawnland. Thanks for coming.
Thank you, Adele. Well, welcome everyone. Again, this is an actual council meeting of the Cumberland County Food Security Council. We have had our pattern of semi-regular meetings disrupted by COVID. We continue to meet in our various collaborations, but haven't actually hosted a topical meeting. So today's meeting, the topic is access to culturally preferred food, which has been of interest to our community, trying to address the needs of newly arriving community members and making sure that people have access to the nourishment that they're familiar with. I think it's much of what we are learning has come with input from our new immigrant neighbors, and we are trying to support everyone's choices in our nourishment. I think this is an evolution of all our various pantry partners, like Wayside, like Good Shepherd Food Bank, like Preble Street, who have recognized in recent years that client choice is central to people being able to take care of themselves and feel empowered and being able to choose the foods that they feel will nourish them and their families. And so as we work together to create this opportunity for service, we want to make sure that people have food that they want. Part of the purpose of today as well is going to be to discuss and potentially identify opportunities for producing more of that food locally. We have a few farmers in the group today, and we've dug up some 5-year-old research that Coastal Enterprises did in partnership with Cultivating Community and a number of other partners, including the city of Portland, to look at culturally preferred foods. It's time to maybe revisit that and think about updating that perhaps, or what's still relevant within the research around what we have been able to produce in the state to support the food needs of our new arriving immigrant neighbors. This is also a moment where, just to acknowledge that the Cumberland County Food Security Council is in a planning process, and we have begun to do outreach to our larger community, former council members, to talk about reforming and restructuring the council. We have a survey out there. I think, Colleen, if you have access to that, if you don't mind dropping the link to the survey into the chat. If folks have an opportunity to do that survey at some point, if you haven't already, we'd appreciate your input in terms of thinking about how the council itself can serve the community better. It's also related to a number of our projects. For example, Adele, who spoke earlier, is working on our Closing the Hunger Gap with Local Food project, certainly using local food to address the food needs of folks who have limited access is a strategy that we identify as critical, and making that link between food access, folks with limited resources, and food that's produced locally by our local farmers is a really important priority in our work. And so some of you may be hearing from Adele in the coming weeks, requesting some of the data that you've collected around your use of local food and serving your community. We also are working on a meat initiative. I think Kenny Pollard is here, and she's working on our meat initiative, which involves looking at halal meat and other local protein sources that are culturally preferred. Dawood Uma, I think if he's not here yet, he will be here, but he's a farmer and a board member who is growing goats specifically. We've been working with Good Shepherd for a long time, talking about the idea of getting locally produced halal meat into their system. It's still a few steps away, but we're getting there. And then folks from public schools are also here. We've worked closely with them over the years with our Food Fuels Learning Initiative and meeting the cultural preferences of families in Portland Public Schools. And we'll talk about a project that we've done with them. You know, Andy Swimmers is from the foundation here, and she's done some leadership around that. And I think we're going to see Maureen and Nyla here also to talk about the project we do with local grocers and ethnic food. So just to point out some of the ways that our work at the Cumberland County Food Security Council, our projects have touched on some of the relevant or on the relevant topic that we're talking about today. For this, defining this meeting topic, we've used culturally preferred food. I know some folks use culturally appropriate. I think the language has evolved. We're not wedded to any particular language. I just think we need to be really conscious of the language we use in all our work to make sure that it is empowering both as we do the work of the folks that we serve, folks in the community that are requesting the services. So you don't have a strong preference either way, but I just want to acknowledge that for this meeting, we're using a couple different alternative languages, culturally appropriate, culturally preferred. And I think that also leads into the thought that it's okay if we have some challenging conversations today. We may learn some things that are working or aren't working. Part of why we're here is to figure out what works for all of us in the community as we work to meet the community needs. So if there's something that's happening that you've identified that may not be the most effective way services are being delivered, as a community member, we're happy to hear about that. This is a safe space to discuss that, and we welcome all conversations here. I think at this point, we can talk a little bit about where we began to recognize the need for culturally appropriate food. Probably one big moment was in the year 2019, when we began to have a large number of arrivals from the southern border of the US bused up to Portland and staying at the expo. And that was a big recognition that there were a lot of food need that wasn't being met. People were being served food that wasn't familiar and they weren't comfortable with, and a lot of resources were mobilized to begin to pull together and identify specific cultural food needs. I'm only speaking about that one moment. We'll touch on a number of other moments throughout this meeting, but I just wanted to recognize that as kind of a maybe a turning point in kind of our recognition discussion about culturally preferred foods and the charitable food system. At this point, we have two main presenters today. Wayside with Mary Zawinski and Rachel are here. Mary is going to talk about the research they've done recently, the focus groups and the project that they've done. And then we also have Good Shepherd Food Bank here, represented by Megan Taft and Nancy Perry, who are going to be presenting a slideshow about the work that they've been doing as well around culturally preferred food. So at this point, Mary, if you're ready, I'd like to turn it over to you. And I think Colleen will highlight you. You know how to do that, Colleen? Colleen's our tech person. So thank you, Mary.
Thanks, Jim. Thanks, Colleen. So I'm happy to be here today. Thank you. I believe Rachel Friedman's here, and she's going to, I think, share the document that came out of the research project that we did. It's almost been a year now. I think we started last March, but it came out of, all of us trying to do the best we can, trying to figure out how to ensure that people had food, especially during the pandemic. And as Jim said, when people were living in the expo, we were asked to help with food there. It became a question of what are we making, what are we serving, what do people want to eat? So we learned a lot through that process. And then last year, when we were, again, trying to figure out what made sense in terms of the emergency food boxes that we were building, we've been building since March of 2020 for people. At one point, we were packing and distributing about 1,000 boxes a week at Wayside. And then we began getting calls from people that would say, like, can you provide us with some culturally appropriate food, pantries that were looking for culturally appropriate food. And people didn't always know what that meant. We would say, well, what are you talking about? And they didn't, we'd say, what culture? And they would be like, oh, I don't know. So I think we all realized then that there was probably a little bit of a disconnect, that it made sense to maybe find out what people were looking for and talking about when they use that term. So we worked with a consulting group here in Portland KDK Consulting. They've done a lot of work with Catholic Charities and other organizations in the area. And our goal was to just ask people what kinds of food they would prefer to have. What kinds of food are we talking about when we use the term culturally appropriate? And so there were 7 focus groups, and they were asked who participated. We had about 33 or 34 participants. And I was not on the focus groups. I just was there to introduce myself, and then I kind of got off. But it turned out to be a discussion about food and traditions, and how do people cook, what do people like to cook, where are people finding the things that they want, where are some of the gaps. And one of the things that we had begun thinking about was, if we continue producing these boxes of food, is there a way to provide foods that make sense for everybody in terms of just the staples, and then maybe adding 1 or 2 ingredients that would make a difference in terms of being able to cook some traditional foods at home. So from those focus groups, we got a lot of information. We got a lot of descriptions and lists of different types of preferred food, both stable foods, staples like flours, different types of flours, cooking oil, rices, dried beans, and then also got information about fresh foods that people would like. And from that group, I formed an advisory committee with 10 people that were part of the focus groups. And we came up with a concept of creating a food box that contained some very basic staples that made sense to people who had access to a kitchen. So we're not talking about people who don't have access to a kitchen. These were people who had access to some type of a kitchen. And we could, provide some ingredients and that were universally appreciated and could be used. And then depending on what community and culture they're from, maybe add in some other more esoteric ingredients that made sense. And So that's what we did. We came up with the document, we came up with the list. We would love to share it with people. We've been sharing it with a lot of people that have been requesting it, organizations. So in right around mid-December, we just did a pilot to see if that would make sense. And I think it was about 250 boxes that we built. And the ingredients included cooking oil, rice, flour, oatmeal, dried beans, lentils, and then we also added sugar. I thought many people, that was sort of an expensive ingredient that many people probably didn't access as they would. And then in terms of fresh produce, we had greens, a variety of greens, garlic, potatoes, and onions. And we distributed those to 4 different organizations in the area. And we added on things like semolina, masa, cassava leaves, fish, avocados, plantains, and working with partners. Those went out at towards the end of December. So that's kind of where we are now. We've had kind of a crazy last few weeks here at Wayside. I'm looking forward to next steps, and we're looking forward to working with more partners and being able to share our information that we got from the focus groups. That I just thought they were really generous in terms of sharing this discussion around food and traditions and what made sense, especially as related to the charitable food system. So that's it kind of in a nutshell. I think, Colleen, were you able to, I know you sent out the document in your email today. So if people don't have access to that, I think Rachel uploaded it to the chat. So that's it.
Oh, thank you, Mary. I really appreciate the effort you made to do that. And I know you have a little bit of limited time. You're here with us for about an hour today. So if there are any immediate questions, maybe we'll see if there are any. Otherwise, we can transition, but I'll give it a moment if there are any immediate questions for Wayside about this particular program before we move forward. I don't see any hands raised at this point. Before I make the transition, I want to acknowledge that I was a little bit remiss in not acknowledging Khadijah Ahmed. She's been kind of central in all these efforts. Khadijah has been independent, running her own grocery and food distribution truck. She's also worked at Preble Street, is now working at Good Shepherd Food Bank. So she's been key in informing us about how to meet these community food needs. And so I think she's going to be part of the presentation that Good Shepherd will be making. Is this the time to transition to those slides, Megan?
Yeah, that works. I think Colleen has our slide deck. Hopefully, if not, I can pop it up on my end either way.
Yes, I do. Just one second.
That looks good to me. Thank you, Colleen. Good afternoon. It's nice to be with you all. I want to start just by sharing gratitude for many of the folks who are on the call today in supporting Good Shepherd Food Bank and our own growing and learning around the needs for culturally preferred foods across many communities in the state. My name is Meg Taft, and as Jim had said, I'm the Director of Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion at the Food Bank. I am joined by several of my wonderful colleagues today. We're going to share this presentation. And really what we hope to share is just an update on our efforts at sourcing and distributing culturally preferred foods and some of the gaps and challenges that we have faced along the way. I do also want to just appreciate and thank Wayside for the work they did through those focus groups. Those have been pretty key in a lot of our sourcing conversations. And so again, just acknowledging the collective work that has been done by so many in this area. I also want to start by acknowledging that we, the food bank, have arrived late to this game. We are working in earnest to fill gaps that we have historically left in our work to ensure food security within BIPOC, immigrant, refugee, and asylum-seeking communities across the state. And like many other white-led organizations, it was COVID-19 that put the magnifying glass on really the gross and systemic inequities that exist in our communities and within our own work. At the food bank, we really became aware that many of our programs, our partners, and our food was not accessible to everyone. And even when it was accessible, it wasn't necessarily meeting the needs. In our attempt to serve the majority of people in our state, we overlooked and we ignored many. And those who were overlooked are the families who have been and continue to be hardest hit by the pandemic and who are experiencing food insecurity at 2 and 3 times the rate of Maine as a whole. So with that introduction, I would like to go to the next slide and ask my colleagues to introduce themselves. And if it works for you all, we can just go in the order of pictures on the slide.
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm happy to be here, happy to learn some additional information. And my name is Kay Gray. I'm the Director of Sourcing at Good Shepherd Food Bank.
Hi everyone, Khadija Ahmed, Community Impact Manager at Good Shepherd.
Good afternoon, everyone. This is Nancy Perry. I'm the Senior Sourcing Manager at Good Shepherd Food Bank.
Excellent. Thank you all for being here with me. Colleen, we can go to the next slide. So our hope is that over the course of the next little bit that we'll be able to share how it is that we've gone about better understanding the need for culturally preferred foods, talk a little bit about the foods that we are currently sourcing and some of our strategies for sourcing and distributing those foods, and then sort of wrap with talking about where we see the gaps, where we are feeling the challenges, and also where we see some opportunities in this work. We can go to the next slide. So to start with, we recognize that a really big part of our work to meet the need for culturally preferred or important foods has so much to do with relationship building, showing up and building trust and community. To that end, we have prioritized hiring staff to support us in doing that. Khadija is one of those folks who's here with us today. Marfine Chan is another, and Niolette Billiou are all part of our equity and advocacy team. You can see in the picture here that Khadija is out in the community building relationships. This is actually at a food distribution event that was in Old Orchard Beach supporting Central African families who have been housed in some of the local motels there. We've also been connecting and building deeper relationships with BIPOC-led community-based organizations, reviewing community reports like the one that Mary talked about from Wayside, and some others that Colleen had attached to the meeting materials. And then lastly, internally, we have worked to make sure that our teams, our sourcing teams, our community partnership team, and our equity and advocacy team are meeting regularly to make sure that we are clearly communicating the needs as we are seeing them and experiencing them in the community, and then bringing them back to create action plans so we can respond accordingly. So I'm going to hand it next off to Khadija and Kay, who are going to talk through some of the foods that we are currently sourcing. Khadija, do you want to talk about the meats?
So we just got a lot of halal meat, which is a very big deal, as everybody knows that meat being the most expensive thing on any family grocery list, it's with such big relief and just a lot of joy that Good Shepherd is now offering halal meat. We have ground beef, whole chicken, rabbit stew meat, goat meat, lamb and beef. We have built up this relationship with farmers that we're hoping that we can start delivering this type of meat more often.
Excellent, thanks. Colleen, we go to the next slide.
And so some of the other items that we have begun to source based on the feedback from the communities include some non-meat products as well as spices. You have quite the list here, and we have some additional items in the pipeline that we are attempting to source, such as salt fish and a few other items from the request list. But as you can see, we're starting to expand our offerings a little bit more to include some of the not so common items, such as the spices, which may be more difficult to get. So.
Thanks. We can go to the next slide.
Part of our sourcing strategies is that we're working with some of our existing vendors. Some of them have carried some of the product that we're looking for, but we've also had to reach out to new vendors, and that is going well. It's taking a little bit of time, but we are making headway with that. Prioritizing high quality protein sources, just trying to make sure that we get those items in, and piloting wide variety of halal meats to determine demand. And it's great that we've been able to work with New England Meats in Connecticut to be able to get a good variety and try them out and see what moves the best. And so far, everything that we've gotten moves really well. So we're very pleased with that. It's also very important to be listening to the community and our partners in the community, and getting some great feedback, which is helping us to move forward and align culturally preferred foods with the food bank's never out strategy. We have some items and groups that we never want to be out of at the food bank, and these culturally preferred foods will be a part of that list as well. And Mainers, Feeding Mainers, are partnerships that we currently have and will be expanding. Currently, we work with the Somali Bantu community, Liberation Farms. One of the newest ones is the Micmac farms that are growing produce and doing fish to the tribal communities. New Roots Cooperative and Cultivating Community are some of the ones that we are currently working with and sourcing. Going into the new year, we're going to be looking at some different types of vegetables. We're already doing sweet potato leaves and things like that, but we've got a lot to learn there. So we're working with our Mainers Feeding Mainers partners. And then we have our community redistribution fund as well, where we've been able to give funds to some of these organizations to help them with sourcing different types of food and helping them in the work that they're doing.
So Colleen, go next slide. Thank you, Kay, Nancy, and Khadija. Colleen, we can advance to the next slide. Excellent. Oh, I'm so sorry. I didn't see that it switched. Can you go back one, please, Colleen? Yes, thank you very much. So at the food bank, we rely on several methods for getting food to where it's needed. The first is our partner network. We work with somewhere around 500 partners across the state. And those include a mix of food pantries, school pantries, healthcare sites, shelters, and community centers. Through the Mainers Feeding Mainers program that Nancy just talked about, we contract with about 70 different partners across the state. And those farms are growing and distributing Maine produce at no cost to our partners. In some of the more resettlement situations, we have established pop-up food distributions like the one that you saw in the first photo of this slide deck down in Old Orchard Beach. We've been distributing cash via our emergency fund. And in 2020, we established that community redistribution fund that Nancy just mentioned. And the goal of the Community Redistribution Fund is really about shifting decision-making power to BIPOC communities. The fund is a participatory grant-making model that has dispersed anywhere between $250,000 to $500,000 annually. And we are looking at continuing to grow and deepen that program under Marfine and Khadijah's leadership. Last year, we supported the startup of a Muslim-led food pantry in Lewiston, and Khadijah is in conversations with folks in the Portland community at looking at the startup of a Muslim-led food pantry in that community. Next slide. So there's a few gaps and challenges that we're experiencing as we step into this work. We have talked lots about halal meats. We would love to source those meats from a halal meat processor in Maine. Jim opened and talked about Uma Farms, who's got something in the works. We know the folks at Liberation Farms are working on something, and there is a couple up in Unity that is also looking at the startup of a halal meat processor. So we are hopeful and eager for those to come online. But as Nancy mentioned, right now we're working with a processor out of Connecticut, New England Meats. Another challenge we face in Maine, as a farmer myself, I can say, is that our growing season is not very conducive to many of the culturally preferred foods that we are seeing in the requests and the lists that we are reviewing. So that's where we default to working with some of our current vendors and seeking new vendors to find some of those products. Also, we see an opportunity for continuing to invest in BIPOC-led food producers and processors. And I'll just leave us with this, because I think this is really what we need to hold at the center of our efforts, is that one of our partners has said to us, we don't want the food bank to create new programs to feed our community. We want the food bank to invest in our community so we can feed ourselves. And so I think you'll see many of our efforts heading in that direction. Happy to shift out of presentation mode. Love to hear thoughts, questions, feedback from anybody. If there's time for that, Jim, if that feels like the right place to go.
Yes, it's time for that. There are a few other issues we can touch on, but at this point, I think it's a good moment to open it up for discussion, hear from the community about the programs we've just heard about, the success and the challenges. Obviously, it hasn't been easy to make some of the transitions that have been made, so I give great credit to Wayside and Good Shepherd, and also Provo Street has made some efforts as well to address the needs of the community specific to cultural preferences in their meals program. If you have a question, you can drop it in the chat or you can raise your hand. I see Penny Jordan has a question, which is somewhat central to what we're going to talk about. Do you want to verbalize that question, Penny? You want me to read it?
Yeah, I'm gonna verbalize the question. Can you hear me okay? Okay.
Yes.
I've been doing some research since last fall when this wonderful woman stopped by. I believe she was from Somalia, and she was very interested in my green beans. But it wasn't the beans she was interested in, it was the leaves. And she talked a lot about how the green bean leaves would be very welcome in her community. And we talked about pumpkin leaves. We walked through the field, and she saw some of the weeds that we throw away. And she goes, those are products that we would want. And so I just wondered if anybody's done any research on products that we currently grow in Maine. And I know that Nancy mentioned the sweet potatoes, and I talked to Rick Belanger about sweet potatoes because he has a lot of sweet potato leaves hanging around. And has anybody done any research on products that we grow and that are really more prolific here in Maine, that are viewed through a different lens that we look at and go, well, I can't, that's not important to me. But it might be important to a different culture. And that's what I'm starting to learn is how do we look at it all through a different lens? Has anybody done that?
I can take that question.
Cool.
Hi, Colleen. Can you hear me?
Yes,
Yes.
Yes. Penelope, I was your neighbor last year. Until last year, I was your neighbor right there at the corner. And of course, I love your vegetable. And yes, most of the stuff you aren't using, the African community will really like to have that. As you brought your food to Good Shepherd every time, the simple thought of all the leaves coming from your sweet potatoes are going back to the dirt, or you are not utilizing it. Even amaranth, which is a weed in your garden, you pick it out and throw it. Amaranth is a very expensive vegetable that we get from Africa. By the time it gets to us, it's frozen and it has came from, Africa is far. If we can get it from you, if you can find a way of saving those leaves, the green bean leaves, squash leaf, all those leaves that don't look like food normally to you is food, because African, we start eating leaves first, then eating the roots of wherever you're growing. It does make sense that while you're waiting for your roots to grow, you can consume your leaves, and the leaves have direct contact with the sun, which we don't get enough in men. So most of the vitamin D are on those leaves. It will be such a good way to find a good thing to find a way to start preserving those leaves and distributing it. Even if you were collecting it fresh, I'm sure just sending it to Pebble Sweet, a lot of Africans go there and will really enjoy having that.
So here's my question, because what I need, because I participated in a CEI study, and it was very challenging because I was learning about the product as I was growing it. Are you, and Good Shepherd, are you willing to offer the knowledge that you can provide me and walk my field and share your knowledge so I can learn from you, so I can make sure I'm harvesting the right food?
Well, before my mouth gets me in trouble, I'll pass that to my boss.
Okay.
Penny, I think we would love to have that conversation.
Oh,
and
you made my day. Thank
as
you.
we think about the expansion of our Mainers Feeding Mainers program, one thing I didn't mention is that we are piloting a decision-making tool at the food bank called an equity lens. And our first go at using that, it's basically a process to have more equitable decision making. We are going to utilize that with our Mainers Feeding Mainers program. So I think we'll see a pretty significant expansion of sourcing culturally appropriate foods through that program. And where we know there are a lot of Maine farmers who are putting a lot of things into the compost, whether it's sweet potato leaves or bean leaves or purslane or other things. We would love to take those out of the waste stream and get them into the hands of people who would like them for their nutrition.
Good, because now you are going to be my best friend.
I will follow up with you after. Thanks so much.
Okay, great.
Thank you, Khadija.
Yeah, I think that's part of why we convene this meeting, to make these connections and begin the process of making these things happen. I see a number of hands up, so I'm going to start calling people in order their hands were raised. I see Daoud has his hand up. Go ahead and unmute Daoud.
Thank you. I just wanted to say that I'm Daoud Umar. I'm the owner of Umar Farms. We've been out here for at least 4 years now. No, it will be 5 coming February. And we've been working on the halal meat well over 20 years. And kind of disappointed, but I want to tell you how this have actually affected me in this time of COVID. I have had both of my daughters, and these are the only 2 children I have, tested positive for COVID. I have 3 granddaughters tested positive for COVID. So that means my family could be wiped completely out just through this crisis. However, I think the community that I'm from, which most people are now identifying possibly as BIPOC, hasn't received any of these funds in order to engage, participate fairly. I know Good Shepherd have helped us and they're still waiting for something to happen, but trying to develop a processing facility here in the state of Maine requires a collective effort. And from what I have seen and what I am experiencing at this particular time, is that effort ain't happening. It's there for my immigrant community, but when it comes to this so-called BIPOC community, which have been completely wiped out, I'm totally dissatisfied. And I need to say that because my immigrant and my Muslim brothers are here on this call. And I'm sure they all know that we've been out here working on this project for a number of years, have went to these communities and spoke to them, and no response. So I'm here to ask them, how much are you here to help us? Because right now we're definitely suffering. So thank you.
Thanks, Doug. I would just say, not necessarily in response to that, but I know Doug is committed to the cooperative model of at his farm there, including other people who want to participate. He has opportunities for other folks to raise animals out on his farm. You know, the block we've hit is just the stringent regulations, and they aren't totally uncalled for in terms of food safety as it relates to meat. So trying to get a facility set up that addresses the halal meat needs has been much more complicated than we anticipated. But Dowd is open to working with the community, and we're working with CDI right now, Cooperative Development Institute, to organize a cooperative on his farm, just so folks know and are aware of that possibilities out there as it relates to the production of some of this food locally. Buffalo, I see you have your hand up. I'm going to call on you next.
Yeah, thank you. I just want to acknowledge and thank, the presenters for the work you've been doing, that you have shared, the work that you plan on doing, that you continuously do. So from where I sit and the populations that we serve, that I work with, thank you. And I wanted to lead with that because every time, I wear these different hats. So every time I wear my advocacy hat, it always comes up as, you're not appreciating the work. We see the work that you do. We appreciate the work that you do. Is that enough? Absolutely not. And that's what I want to talk about. There's service and systems. And Dawood just mentioned about, and he's one person who's emailed me over and over again around, his farm and the goats, all these halal foods. And like, can you make that connection? And have struggled for a number of months, and years since he started doing that to even make that connection to him. A few people that have gone there and like, well, we can't afford it, it's expensive, and I look at it now, looking back and looking at what we're currently dealing with right now is systems and, service. So you're providing direct service, you're giving us, we're very grateful. We could not have done some of this work 2019, when the expo happened, we could not have done that work without, emergency funding that came in from foundations, from organizations like the Good Shepherd, from individuals. We couldn't have done that. Today, as I'm speaking today, we have 700 and counting asylum seekers in motels. So there are two, that's why I'm talking about service. So the things that we get to do and we're like, yeah, we're doing this, we're doing that, those are good. But when you get into a crisis, the crisis really give us an opportunity to look at what what we've put in place as services, whether they are working or not. And that's where the rubber, should hit the road. And usually that's where the wheels fall off. When I'm hearing all these things and my staff are spending hours and hours on the road, trying to look for ethnic food, trying to find it, trying to cook it, trying to do all these things. We run around and we get funding. We just got some funding that's supposed to be coming from Good Shepherd. Thank you so much. But that is also just a service. We have to get that money to put into a system for that to work. And when we don't have that system, we have to create the system of where to source the food, how to cook it, where to find it, how to transport it. So we're looking at a much bigger issue right now. And I'm speaking like this to push us to places of where we do the service, but we create systems so that in a crisis, we don't have to be making makeshifts, with finances. It's expensive for us to be putting out so much money every time there's a crisis and then putting out that fire. And then we move away, we don't create a system. Then another crisis starts, we start all over again. This is the point. And when I'm looking at right now, if we had a system where right now in a crisis, we've been buying boatloads of meat in Sam's Club, why aren't we connected to a system where we just go to Dao's farm? Dao's should be killing, goats for me every night because the amount of goat meat we're buying, but we're just trying to source it in little bits and pieces. And so, Jim, I'm very grateful for what gets to be put out. But we live in silos of where what we're dealing with the last 2 months in our work right now with ethnic culturally appropriate food. It's like two different worlds, So let's bring those two worlds together, so that we are really looking at service. And what I'm going to leave, or you provide us with is, what systems, which some of you have talked about it, what systems worked in 2019 and why did they work? What systems are working now? Why are they working? What didn't work? Why isn't it working? And you can't answer those questions by yourselves. You have people that people that eat the food, but there are people who serve the people who are supposed to be connected. So there are different facets that you need for this, for this to be addressed. So I just wanted to, really push us to places of where we're not just talking about service, we're also talking about systems and then putting those two together. Thank you.
Thank you, Mufalo. I always appreciate the grounding you bring to this and the wisdom and the challenge that you present to us as we work to serve the community and remind us that we have more to do. So I really appreciate you bringing that up for us. I see one more hand up. I see Fatuma Hussein. Hello, Fatuma. Are you there? Chasing your kids?
Can you hear me? No, I'm actually out. Thank you. Hi, Jim. I was so excited to see you. How are you?
Good. Glad to have you here, Fatuma.
Yes. Credit goes to Mufalo. She actually pulled me out of a meeting and she was like, hey, you got to join this meeting. And I was like, okay, I will do that. Yes, ma'am. Thank you, Mufalo. I was along the lines Mufalo is talking about. I think Daoud's cry for help and the pleas that happen for communities of color across the state is super important and growing. And I just feel like sometimes it's on deaf ears and that we don't really look at equity across the board for BIPOC communities. And then you've got these immigrants who have been around for for many years, but more so in the last 20 years or so, much more at a larger scale, which then prompted, I think, Jim, our work together around food, right? And us getting involved with the NESA program and getting the first farmer, Hawa Ibrahim, who was the first farmer. So 20 years later, I think it feels like we have the same conversation. So and I apologize, I didn't, I wasn't part of the presentation, but I'm thinking, we've got a lot of halal markets here in Lewiston, Auburn, maybe 12, 14 of them, mostly on Lisbon Street, that strip. All of our meats come from outside the state. Can the food bank, I put that on the food bank, can the food bank, Shepherd, can you play a role of maybe having half a day seminar? I know in a pandemic, but looking at what do we have in place? I guess that's what we're getting at. Look, what do we have in place in terms of both access, embedded in equity, but both access, consumption, and what assets or strengths do we have? And if we were to look at that, I would want to see a place where we say we in the state of Maine is where our production is, and that's it takes a lot of effort and a lot of investment, but that's where we start. And so in order for me, why I eat goat meat, and the goat meat that I eat is frozen goat meat. I don't know where it's coming from. I was at the halal market over the weekend, and I got a little bit over $200 worth of goat meat and beef. They're halal, at least that's what I'm told, and it's frozen. So I don't know that it's in the best health, whatever, And so what I'm getting at is I think we need to piece the pieces together. For 20 years, 30 years, 40 years, and hundreds of years, we keep coming back and saying, you've got to listen to what our needs are, and you have to empower us and give us the necessary tools to be able to do the work. And so I hear what Dawood is saying, because what Mufal is saying is very true. We are reacting to services. We are service delivery people who are providing services that are culturally and linguistically specific, are reacting to the need at the moment. And so what we're being challenged with is, are there systems that can collaborate, partner, have peer education, peer-to-peer education, support each other, and also look at food through the lens of equity. And I'm glad that Mafin is now our champion, and we're putting a lot of work to you and Khadija. I feel really, really bad, but we're going to push and push and push, because this is the beginning of the conversation.
Thank you, Fatuma.
I would, Jim, if I could just say thank you, Fatuma and Mufallo and Dawood. The honesty and the forthrightness is important. We welcome the challenge because it helps us clear out our blind spots. And I would say that we are having the same conversations about much more interest in investing in systems rather than operating in a reactionary way, in an emergency way. And so much in part to the feedback and the challenges that you have presented to us over the last couple of years, we are moving in that direction, and we are eager to be a partner at that table to support a systems approach to a lot of what you're talking about. So thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Megan. I don't know if Fatuma had something else to say. Okay, she's taking her hand down. Yeah, I really appreciated the way that you concluded your presentation about what you're hearing in the community is communities asking for investments in the community so the community can feed itself, because that's been my approach throughout the last 20 years. Fatuma referenced New American Sustainable Agriculture Project, which brings me back around to something Penny said about, what grows in the field. And Khadijah's talking about amaranth. There was a Guatemalan woman. She was a former employee to Costa Egg Farm who was a part of our project. And Dick Brzezowski from Crop Extension came out and was pointing out the weeds, among them amaranth. She's like, no, don't pull that. I can take that home. And she came back the next day with the most delicious preparation with the amaranth leaves that was just felt so nourishing and delicious. And it was like, as Penny noted, there are so many things that can grow in our fields that we're just not using in the ways that we could learn from the community about better ways to nourish ourselves based on what we can grow and how we use different parts of different crops that we grow, as well as identifying additional things that can grow here that we might not have thought of because we didn't have the knowledge of how to use this food. So I just want to note that as we think about systems and investments, I think the other thing, I see Dawood has his hand up. I know one thing that we've been very sensitive to and appreciative of is that when the farm gets set up to process halal meat, we know we have a market. That's going to be a key thing and all that. Some of the institutions like Good Shepherd, like Sodexo at USM are ready for it. We just need to get the system in place to process that meat. So I'm going to turn it back over to Dawood because it looks like he has something else to say.
No, thank you, Jim. I just wanted to say that here's one of the things that's been happening over the years is that with the good effort, and I'm sure it's good efforts, that people are trying to do in and around helping sustain and establish community, there's always a new influx of different situations that's coming. So it's always putting us in this emergency situation and we're responding in that way. That's not the way I've been functioning. We have been working to plan and try to work with the rest of the community. It hasn't been a positive response. And I could tell you clearly that the reason that there's not a positive response is because we don't have resources. If we had the resources, people run right out here and grab the meat. I got a guy right now that's already planning on taking 4 goats off my hand. He already planned it. He got it paid for. He's ready to go. I said, listen, man, as soon as you buy that 4 goats, I'm out. And so what we've been doing is trying to talk to some of the farmers and say, hey, listen, we can't afford, honestly, to go out of state and grab us some goats at a very low price and drag them back up in here and try to sell them and resell them. What we want to do is have a relationship with the farmers. And so that they know that they have a place to deposit their animals that they may be culling, the ones that may be the young ones that they might want to get rid of. We'll take them, try to raise them at a low price because we got our connections with the hay people right around here. Guy right down the street grows the hay. We made a connection with Maine Grains. They're delivering it. So we're trying to keep the costs down, but we can't keep the costs down if we don't have customers. And all we asking is, look, if you come out here, I think we could begin to understand one another, the costs that the farmer have to pay in order to stay in business and the costs that you may have to pay in order for you to say you want to buy more. But what we're offering is vegetables as well. We're trying to keep the costs down. We're trying to provide vegetables. We're trying to provide a space where people can come out here and grow their own vegetables and it become a community effort versus leaving all that weight on one farmer or one group trying to take this weight on. So that's why when we was talking to CDI, they encouraged us. So this is not something that I'm coming up on my own. They encouraged us and say, if you guys could cooperate, work as a cooperative, it may be a little bit easier. That way we're not competing against one another. So you could go in your direction and have your success or your failure, but we'll be cooperating. And I think that's the spirit that we're trying to start off with this year. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Dawood. I appreciate that. I want to give a shout out to AJ, USM student, who's listening attentively. She's one of the interns we're going to be mobilizing to do some of the research because as Dawood talks about the price, one of the things that we're struggling with, and again, he talks about the competition, we shouldn't be competing amongst ourselves, among the small producers in Maine. We got to compete against the large multinational global food system that is, driving down the prices, being subsidized, and really, importing bad food that has negative health impacts in our community, whether it's, processed food in packages that's competing with the nutritious food that we could produce here, or whether it's that frozen meat that Fatuma was talking about, coming from as far away as New Zealand and Australia, being flown in. And is it halal? I mean, that was a question Fatuma had. You know, if it's processed locally, we can guarantee that it's halal. You know, so I mean, there's a lot of evidence of halal fraud in many of these as well. So, you know, there are many opportunities here as we come together, but I think we have to come together in a spirit of cooperation, as Dow speaks about, working together, bringing down the obstacles, building trust among each other. You know, we're making new friends with meat cutters. Sam Margolin is a man who's come and met with us and is going to be training us on doing some of the meat cutting. But, you know, it's a slow process, and it's going to take a big infusion of resources to get the facility that we really need to have the grassroots meat processing that needs to happen in the state. But we're working on it, and part of it's going to mean everyone coming together and working together and bridging the gap, right, between, you know, we're competing with lower prices. That's part of the unhealthy food system. So we have to both help the consumer understand the value of the product they're buying and the impact it has on their health and the nutritional value. So we could support the farmers and maybe have more local subsidies with the farmers. Maybe we have, you know, there's different ways we're trying to figure out how to bridge that gap, making sure that farmers can accept the SNAP program and the other bonus programs that allow people to buy more local produce. And then once they taste it, once they experience it, you know, even our gleaning program, distributing fresh food through the charitable food system, once people have the experience and realize the value of that food, they're willing to spend a little more and spend a little less on the junk that often makes their way into the household through the unhealthy food system. So it's a big education project, but it's also a big cooperation project. I see Fatuma has her hand up again, so I'm going to turn it back to her.
I was going to say, Jim, a pound of goat meat that's frozen is, I think, almost $6. You know, so it's extremely very expensive, and so I want to, I think it's important for us to challenge ourselves when we talk often about systemic changes. In this case, communities that don't have equity and capacity and all of that, you know, we tend to think of planning and a number of different things. Well, and that's great, and I agree with that. But at the same time, I think we give the systems time and almost an excuse to not be able to do this work. And so it is important for us to really think the impact it has on communities, because every day that goes by, we suffer. Every day that goes by, we beg more. Every day that goes by, that gap becomes wider and wider and wider. And so I'm wondering if you know, and then the other thing is, Jim, you know very well, and many people here know very well, that we don't have a lot of data. You know, there's this idea around, let's understand data, tell your story through data. A lot of our cases and what we do is very underreported, and therefore it's not supported by data. So we need to develop some of these things. We need to create some of these things. And you need to believe in these communities that they can actually be part of the process and serve themselves in much more effective and better way than anybody else. And so I think it's very important for us to learn, you know, through the last 20 years, what have we done? Where did we succeed? Where are our weaknesses? And support us, because it's sometimes it's very tiring to keep talking about what your needs are. And if that needle doesn't shift, people just move on. And so I just want to, you know, I want to encourage us to, whatever it is, it's got to be some way to connect the dots And if it means for us to knock on some doors, we can do that. We've come a very long way. That's what we did with the pandemic. We went to Good Shepherd and we said, we know how to serve our people and we know what they eat and we know where that food is coming from. And Good Shepherd was very good to us. We need to do more of those.
Well, thank you, Fatuma. I'm going to hook you up with AJ, who's the USM intern who's doing some of this research, and you'll be a key informant as she does. We have a couple other interns we're bringing on as well that will be gathering some of this data around food preferences, food access. So, you know, we have a young Muslim man who's going to be joining us as well, student at USM. So with the oversight of Professor Matthew Hoffman, we have a research project, and it would be very helpful, I think, for AJ to talk to you. I see one of my board members, Judy Gatcher, has her hand up. I see AJ's hand up too. I'm going to skip you, Judy, real quick and give it to AJ first to follow up for Fatuma.
Hi, is this working?
Yes.
Okay. So I want to go back to something that Mufalo said earlier. You made a great point about systems being created in times of crisis that should exist before crises happen, so that when you go into crisis mode, you don't have to scramble to put things together and you have something more stable and long lasting. And then you posted your questions here in the chat, and I am wondering, I guess my question is for the questions that you put in the chat. What organizations do we need to be asking these questions to? Is it just Food Shepherd, or are there other organizations that might have information? And then for Fatima, I like the point about needing more data, and I would love to know what kinds of data need to be focused on the most. I guess generally, yeah, that's all I have.
I don't know if Mufalo, you're on mute if you're responding.
Yeah, thank you for that question. So the organizations right now that there's more, you know, that would be that in our minds and in our work, I can really come up with a number of organizations, but the three organizations that right now are in terms of service, in the Good Shepherd, Cover Street, Wayside, they manage pantries around. So those come into that. But those are the three in terms of service. When you're looking at systems, it goes beyond. This is Jim and you start with groups like Jim's group. That's systems. We were just testifying yesterday, on a report on 2030, that some of the conversations that I elevated to that. So systems at state level, but also at municipal level. So there are different organizations and groups that I would think of, but when to start, especially for this group, I'm not sure, I can see a number of people who are in here who can find themselves in either both service and systems. So it goes beyond just these three organizations that I mentioned, but they're the ones that have come out in terms of like, we're doing culturally appropriate food. The schools, that might be a system as well, and might be both system and service, but they're also, supported by these three, entities. So I would start with that, in terms of level of priority, and a lot of other organizations represented here can find themselves in that. But I'm hoping, Jim, that this might be something that could be put on the agenda for the next, so that we're talking more, especially as it relates to this topic, that it just doesn't end here, like this one-off thing, and then organizations can go out and check and say, we're doing this. There's more to this work. We're barely scratching the surface. So I'm hoping that there could be some time that's put on this group's agenda to discuss that in detail. To like, what does that even mean? You know, maybe, and I know a lot of folks are like scratching their heads, like, what systems? You know, I can spend the whole time, you know, talking to you about the systems and just giving you an understanding of this is what we basically need. It's how do we use, you know, the current, you know, structures that are built. And I'll give you an example maybe quickly within sourcing. How do we use the current structures to elevate our grassroots into that so that they don't have to go and create? We don't want to be Good Shepherd. We don't want to be Pebble Street. We don't want to do that. We want to remain who we are, but we want to use what we have to scale into already existing, you know, systems and structures so that it's most cost effective, but it's also in terms of capacity. We won't have to go and hire 20 people to create a Good Shepherd or a Wayside. No, we can just remain the two of us working through Pebble Street, working through. So it's scaling our work through already existing structures that are much bigger than we are in terms of capacity and money.
Yeah, thank you, Mufala. It's very insightful. I'm going to give Judy a chance to ask her question now.
Yeah, good afternoon. This is so interesting and so exciting to hear this moving on and seeing so many people. I don't know a lot of you. You can see on my name. My name is Judy Gatchel. I am a member of the board. I've been there since we started this organization. I don't even know how many years ago. And my background is in public health nutrition. And I've worked primarily in just different programs, including SNAP Ed and WIC and those kinds of programs. So just a little intro. The other thing I want to say before I ask my question is I'm sitting here thinking about, for the first time this year, we grew sweet potatoes. Oh, those trees. I mean, they were just amazing. And we kept looking at them, and we were talking today, should we do this again? It's an interesting process growing sweet potatoes. You don't get to see anything or know if they're even in there until the day that you go to dig them up. And I still have a 3-pound one I can't wait to eat. So just thinking about, you know, what we throw away as well as green beans. Okay. So, but I'm wondering as I'm listening to this, and when you talk about working within existing systems, it's so important. I also wonder if there are models for this from other states. You know, are other states successfully doing this? And has anyone looked into that? And is there something that we can learn to move forward here by both the challenges and the successes in other states? I also wonder, because of my experience, people talked about, you know, communities and folks understanding about the healthfulness of some of the foods and the unhealthfulness. You know, is there a process in place? I know there's SNAP Ed. I don't know how much of this is being included in any kind of SNAP Ed programs, but is there any, you know, are there any education programs going on? Do we have peer educators where it seems like that would be a really good way to go? So just throwing that out. Thank you.
Thank you, Judy. Yeah, in terms of the other states, I think that's something that we need to continue to explore. It's tricky to find stuff that applies because there is such a unique situation in many ways, what's happening in Maine. But certainly, I'm always on the lookout for those good models, both, you know, and that's something that we've been talking about with Dowd as well, just in terms of cooperative formation. What are the different cooperative models we want to consider? Is there a processing cooperative? Is there an animal growing cooperative? You know, is there a consumer CSA cooperative that's going to buy the meat? So those are all things, you know, and that's just one level of potential models we could tap into. At this point, I'm going to, I know Courtney, I see Courtney's hand, but Khadijah is ahead of Courtney, so I'm going to call on Khadijah to.
Thank you, Jim. So I just want to say that at the beginning of the conversation, we started by saying that Good Shepherd does acknowledge the fact that they had let a lot of people of color down. Hence why they have hired me and Marfin and Nailat to have a voice. And some of you who knows me and who don't know me, you know that I'm not quiet. If there is an issue, I'll be as loud as possible, especially when I feel like it's about Islam or about my Blackness and the Blackness of my children, my family, the people I meet every day and the people I love. It's not gonna be a resting issue about it. I'm always gonna be loud about it and make sure that I am heard. So I wanna take this opportunity and let anyone who has any idea to please contact me and let Good Shepherd know what is it you think you need and how you think we can help you. If in the past, maybe you had the experience of connecting with them and didn't get anyone to hear you or to help you, we are here now. As a person of color, I am here now. As an employee of Good Shepherd, I am here now to hear you. If you have something to say, please feel free to connect with me, send me an email, call me, find a way to make your voice heard, because we just meet in these meetings for an hour and then it like dump all the issue on people. We can't resolve everything in one meeting. We cannot come up with solution by just dumping the blame. We can resolve the issue by working together, which is the team also we've been having in this meeting. It's all about how do we cooperate, how do we find cooperation, how do we associate with the people who are already doing the work and find a way to help them. Our doors are open. We started and we will finish this meeting again by saying that our doors are open. Please come to us with whatever you want to talk about, whatever issue you have, and we understand it not just how do we get cultural appropriate foods to people. It comes with a lot. I talk a lot about even just moving food from Portland so we can have immigrants in other cities. Everybody's in Portland, everybody's around downtown Portland because of Pepper Street. They know where the pantry are, that's why everybody's there. If we could move the food out of Portland, we can move the population out of Portland. Then we can spread the population around also. It's so many issues, not just that one issue of food, and we are open to all other issues that are in it. My title is community partner, community impact manager, still can say it right. Community impact manager in the community. So please connect with me, come with your issue and work with us on finding the solution that fits your problem, not the everybody problem, not the problem of the past, the problem you're having right now. And we are a growing live organization. Nothing is written on stone. You can always find a solution. Even when we talk about meat, we cannot process or we cannot give goat meat that is fresh because we also under the USDA, we have to give only frozen meat. It's so many layers that maybe a little more understanding and explanation from our parts to you will make things clear. So again, feel free to connect with us. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Khadija. I'm so grateful for your leadership and for Good Shepherd recognizing your leadership and bringing you on, and for Good Shepherd's leadership in this. And we are here at the Cumberland County Food Security Council to help convene any follow-up that needs to happen related to this, whether it's related to food production or the systems that need to be in place to address the community needs. So I'm just really grateful that we're having this conversation today. I want to note that we scheduled this till 4:30. My clock says 4:19. Cumberland County Food Security Council has been known to go over time if needed to, if the conversation continues. So if folks need to leave at 4:30, I will acknowledge we did schedule it till 4:30, but this conversation will go on as long as it needs to this afternoon. I've seen my friend and Khadija and Megan's colleague, Courtney Kennedy, with her hand up. But Courtney's going to say something about nutrition education because that's what she does with Cooking Matters. So I'm going to call on Courtney and turn it over to her.
Hey, thank you so much, Jim. Exactly, that is what I was going to follow up Judy's question too. Judy, there is some work happening. We are not good at it when it comes to education. And so there is a lot of collaboration happening between SNAP-Ed and many other partners to really do a deeper dive into supporting the needs around nutrition education and meeting people where they are. So great question. We are on it. I just wanted to share that. I just want to say, I feel like I am the luckiest person alive to get to work alongside some of the most amazing people dedicated to ensuring that we are working in collaboration with our communities. Khadija, Marfine, Meg, Nilette, we are doing this work together with their support and their expertise and their connections to the community. So thank you, Jim, and the Cumberland County Food Security Council for engaging in this conversation. It's been a great opportunity to connect and to hear what is happening across the board and concerns. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Courtney. I noticed that we had one representative. I invited a bunch of folks from Preble Street personally, but I noticed there was one person. Is he still here? I was going to get some input from Izzy, but it looks like she may have left. So yeah, because I think it's important that Preble Street, the messages that are being discussed here get back to Preble Street, but we will take that to them in another format. I did want to shout out a couple other people that I'm very happy to see today. I don't know Theta well, but Colleen speaks highly of you and the work you're doing and potential opportunity for producing some of the culturally preferred foods. I know that's why you're here listening, Theta. I don't know if you have any questions or thoughts. You're on mute.
Yeah, we've started this a couple years ago. We're really excited to continue this work and expand on it. I'm having some trouble finding seed sources. So I didn't know if anybody could help me, specifically some African eggplant. And we are an organic farm, so we try to source everything organically. So that's kind of really my big question of the day is seed sourcing.
We will definitely note that, and we will work to help you solve that problem. I don't think that one should be that complicated. We have some great seed vendors in the state of Maine. People all over the country buy their seeds from Maine, so there should be an opportunity here to help you with that. Another shout out I want to give is to Andy Summers in Portland Public Schools, our Food Fuels Learning Project. While Andy's done a lot of resource development around supporting the community food needs as it relates to getting grocery cards into the hands of families who have limited resources they can buy from their local ethnic grocer. That's one example of a project that we've worked on. Our Food Fuels Learning Project partnership with Portland Public Schools looks at the whole school food system. We look at the charitable food system and families that need access to that food. We look at the school meals and the development of meals that cater to some of the ethnic preferences, because there are so many immigrant families in Portland Public Schools. There's some models with our farm school program that we're working with Chef Sam Gasparo and Jane McLucas, the food service director, to look at some different menu items that can be featuring ethnic foods. So that's another piece that we've been working on. I know Andy's always looking up for resources to support the families of Portland Public Schools, specifically as it relates to, well, in general, but when working with us, you look specifically at different opportunities to raise money around food resources. I don't know if you want to say anything, Andy, you have any questions or just want to wave, you're welcome to.
No, but just thanks for the shout out, Jim. And our mission is specifically for students and families in the Portland Public Schools. But I do feel especially concerned about the families in motels. So if there's a group that is continuing to work on that, I would be happy to be looped in terms of helping to provide potentially funds, volunteers, facilities at the schools, something like that, because I think that's an area we need growth in. Thanks.
Thank you, Amy. I also want to shout out Co-op Extension. I know we've Pamela wants to get more involved with the work of the Cumberland County Food Security Council. I know you guys are looking at more food production this season at the Falmouth site, and potentially we could talk together about maybe some of these ethnic crops being produced in the demonstration gardens at Co-op Extension. So hello, Pam. I do want to also shout out one of the 501c3 founders of the Cumberland County Food Security Council, Mary Turner, who's now a Good Shepherd Food Bank. So thank you, Mary. It's always good to see you. I'm just really grateful to see the new friends here and the old friends that have been here. Any other last questions or thoughts as we come towards the end of the meeting? Thanks again to Wayside. Rachel, I know Mary had to leave at 4 for their presentation, the work they've been doing on making food accessible to the community. Also, I just could probably shout out Catherine Sargent and Lauren Hickey from Locker Project, who are doing a great job supporting the community as well, particularly families in the schools of Greater Portland. Catherine's also a board member, and Lauren's a former Vista with the Cumberland County Food Security Council. I'm looking at the chat. I see Fatuma's question about small group to help work on the research and support the students. We have a weekly meeting, Fatuma, on this project with the interns. I am going to give AJ your contact info, assuming I still have something that's current, unless you want to dump it in. But we'll find a way to connect you to this project so you can provide your insight and support to this project. I'm pretty sure I can find current information for you. You find your way here so I can find you. Anything else as we wind up today's meeting? I'm really grateful for the progress we've made today, the connections that have been made, the insights that have been shared. It's really a strange time. I didn't really acknowledge the fact that I've gotten so used to being in this COVID space and meeting on Zoom that, I really am looking forward to the day we go back to Pamela's office at Crawford Extension in Falmouth and meet in person, which is where we had a lot of our meetings over the recent years. But right now, it's just so nice to see so many faces, which I don't often see in my day-to-day in my home office. So thank you all for showing up today, being here, being part of this learning community, and working hard to make sure our community food needs are met. You want to say anything, Colleen? Thank you for running the tech behind the scenes, making sure everybody was heard.
I don't think so. I just want to thank everyone for participating, and we will have send out a recording to everyone who registered, because I know there were some people who weren't able to make it.
Well, I'm going to give you guys back 2 minutes of your day. It's 4:28 by my clock. So thank you all. I look forward to seeing you all again and continuing this conversation.
Thank you.